movies in the rooms. And I could tell the woman especially and the guy both were getting a little aggravated by this sin right in front of them. And I'm a knucklehead people pleaser from way back, you know. And so I score some points with these nice people that have been very kind to me. I called the manager over. I said, Sir, come here. I said, looking at the sign, I said, I want all the pornography in my room to be disabled. And he said, you sicko, we only have regular pornography in our hotel. Ready? Oh!
I was waiting for that part.
Oh, well. Don't give up your day job, Bob. This brings us, I want to talk about a step that's a very little step, and it's a very big deal for some of us. One of the guys I sponsor calls it the Judas Step. And he calls it the Judas Step because chances are, if you're 10 years sober and something has corrupted you and betrayed you in your spiritual program, it's probably step 6, and you didn't realize it. I am amazed how many problems deep into many double decades sobriety revert back to step 6. It seems like the two major surrender steps are the second half of step 1 and step 6. How often we placate this because we intellectually know we should be better, we should be entirely ready. We intellectually understand the cause and effect, the consequences. We see that, but the truth is we're not really and truly entirely ready. What I've been over my sobriety is I've been entirely ready to have God remove the consequences of some of this stuff. But I'm not sure I want to give up the whole bottle of wax. Because within my hanging on is usually a delusion of value. I don't hang on to things because I'm self-destructive. I think there's a payoff. I think there's something in this behavior that is going to secure me if I'm threatened. It's going to fulfill me if I'm vacant. It's going to protect me. It's going to enhance me. It's going to do something for me. And what are my defects of character except defective defense mechanisms against a life that sometimes is quite frightening? What is anger and rage except a defense mechanism against when I'm threatened, when I'm afraid people are going to roll over me and take advantage of me, so I bluster up in rage to defend myself? What is lust except a defense mechanism against a life I'm afraid is going to be bland and boring and uneventful and lonely? What is greed except a defense mechanism against a fear that there's not going to be enough? What is jealousy and envy except a fear that you got a big piece of the pie here. There won't be anything left for me. And it's all defense mechanisms. And the tragic part is that there's a time when some of them worked somewhat, but they don't work anymore. We play things out years past the time when they had any value. When you're 3 years old and you get upset about something, you may have grown up in a family where you could have a temper tantrum, and if you'd had it long enough and persisted enough, you get your own way. Your parents would cave. They give you the candy or whatever you wanted if you had the temper tantrum long enough, maybe. That might be cute, sort of, in a pathetic kind of way if you're 3 years old. You're 23 years old. This isn't cute anymore. And your temper tantrums have taken more adult forms now, haven't they? You've ratcheted them up to match the facade on the outside. So why do I hang on to some of this stuff? how do you become entirely ready? Well, I think some of us, we have to exhaust ourselves with things that don't work. I think the process, in my experience, of becoming entirely ready to have God remove a defect is very similar to the process it took with my drinking. When you think about it, I was just talking at lunch with someone about this. When you think about it objectively, if you were as spiritually persistent with a defect of character and talking to God about it, your sponsor, and working the steps on it as you have been for your drinking, you'd be free of it. But who here can be that persistent and make that defect, that problem, a legitimate, consistent piece of spiritual business, as my alcoholism has been for over 33 years? And so I never really get it all done here. I never get it all done. I think I hang on to some stuff because of this delusion of value. There was a television show on when I was a kid, little kid. I remember, I wasn't very old. I remember this one episode. It's called Rescue 8. I don't know if you got that up here. But it was about these paramedics that worked out of a firehouse, and they would go out on distress calls when people are in trouble, and they'd try to help them. In this one particular episode, these two paramedics who star the show, they come on this scene, and there's this cute little girl, and she's crying hysterically, and she's very frightened, and her arm is wedged up in a vending machine, and they can't get it out, and they try to get it out, and it's really wedged in there. It's locked up and jammed up in there, and she's hysterical. And her parents are there, and they're very upset. And they've been trying to pull her arm out. It's just hurting her. It's just really stuck in there. And they don't know what to do. And now the fire trucks have arrived. Now the firemen are pulling equipment off the trucks. They're pulling torches, and they're pulling saws out. And as they're bringing in the torches and the saws and talking about cutting the door and everything, it's terrifying this little girl. It's scaring her more. And the one paramedic's watching the whole thing, and he kneels down next to the little girl, and he says, "Sweetheart, do you have something in your hand?" And she goes, "Uh-huh. What do you got in your hand?" Candy bar." "Would you let go?" "It's my candy bar. It's my candy bar. It's my candy bar. It's my candy bar." And he backs away. He realizes this gal ain't giving up the candy bar. He don't know what to do. And he backs away, and he just, oh my God. And he thinks for a moment. He kneels down next to her, and he says, "Sweetheart, I'll make you a promise." She looks at him skeptically. He says, "I'll promise you, if you let go of that candy bar, I promise you I will get you 2 candy bars." 2? "Really?" And she says, "I promise." And because she trusts him, she lets go of the candy bar, and her arm slides out of the vending machine. What's your candy bar? You got one. You got a couple, probably. We don't hang on to stuff that we intellectually know is destructive and negative because we're that way, because there's a candy bar there. There's some self-gratification. There's some little nougat of thing that we think is of value, but it's not really. And I think what part of the awakening has, there's a prayer in step 6 that I missed. After I did I don't know why, if I missed it on purpose or missed it because I missed it. I didn't say the prayer, the willingness prayer. It says on the top of page 76, if we still cling to something, we'll not let go. We ask God to help us to be willing. I missed that prayer. And so what did I do? Is I went about managing my defects of character. I'm going to muscle them back into place. I'm going to conquer them because now I have the information and the desire, and I'm going to conquer these defects of character. And I'll tell you, my experience, there's a principle in physics. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. And everything I attacked with my will became stronger. it was almost, there's a line there's a part of the book where it talks about we do this with alcohol. When we try to willfully not drink, the book says, what happens is we end up with a bigger explosion than ever. And I do that with my defects of character. I would just willfully, I ain't going to do that. It's like a slingshot kind of. It's a funny dynamic. When you're willfully not going to do something, you're okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm never. Matter of fact, not only am I not doing it, I feel sorry for people who still do it. I'm kidding. You know what I mean? You're kidding willfully. And then what happens? Lack of power is my dilemma. I run out of power and this. And all of a sudden I act out on it. Only big time. And then I crash and burn. I willfully not going to do it. I never said the prayer. I never asked God for the willingness. It just seemed too simple. And if you try to conquer your defects of character willfully in sobriety for a number of years, there'll come a day, if you're like me, where all of a sudden one day you'll read the 7th step and you'll understand why it says humbly. Because you failed. And you failed a lot. And you made it worse. And I made it worse. I think some of my defects of character, when you hit them with self-will, there's a kid's game in the arcades called whack-a-mole. And it's very much like that. You have these defects of character and you whack them down with a hammer, and they pop up over there. And you whack that one down, it pops up. And sometimes they come up in different forms. They change. Sometimes it's years later. I'll give you one example. I was so much aware of how judgmental I was. Oh, my God. I mean, my whole resentment list, it was pathetic. Now, you got to remember, most of my resentments are people in AA, and oh, my God, I had everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous on my resentment list. And it was just pathetic. I thought, oh, my God, I'm so judgmental. I'm never going to be that way again. That's it. I'm not going to be judgmental ever again. And in no time at all, I started noticing the judgmental people in AA. And I started judging the judgmental people in AA, which makes me exactly like them. And I just whack-a-mole came up over here. Hit this bad problem with gambling. Didn't gamble for 25 years. Retired, I had a lot of money to invest, and I thought, stock market's not really gambling, is it? And it probably wouldn't be for a normal person. Within a couple months, I'm on that computer day trading 6 hours a day. At one point, you want to tell you how you lose sleep? Have $1 million in cash and $1 million in margin, where your whole net worth shifts $500,000 in one day. It drive you crazy. It drive you nuts. And I was addicted to it. And a guy I sponsored busted me. And it got so, and I couldn't stop. I was as addicted to it as you can get. It was unbelievable. And he calls me one day, and he's got a serious problem. And I'm on the phone. He says, "What's that noise?" Nothing. He says, "That's the keys on the computer, isn't it?" I'm doing. He says, "You're trading stocks, aren't you?" He said, "You're not even listening to me, are you?" Hey, no, I'm listening to you. What did I just say? I wasn't listening to him. I was trading stocks. And he busted me. I felt horrible. In step 7, we ask God to take away the things that stand in the way of our usefulness. And this thing that was consuming me, it blocked me from you and blocked me from God. And I started making it a serious piece of business. And I was just talking with someone about this. This has never, ever failed me. If I can keep something a serious piece of spiritual business, which means that at least twice a day, God and I have a conversation about my desire to be free of this. In time, it goes away. It doesn't happen automatically. It's not like that. It sneaks up on you. And I woke up one day and I knew it. I knew it. I went over to the computer and I sold everything. I didn't even care if the market was up or was down. I just sold everything and I got out. And I haven't done that trading stuff since. And it took months of asking him a couple times a day. God works slow sometimes. He's very old. You gotta cut him a break. He's very old. And you know, A is a funny thing. It's like you take all these actions and things change, but you don't know, you don't experience the change. It's just sometimes later, you know, things are different. All of a sudden you realize something happened to me. When did it happen? I don't know. We used to have this marijuana back in the 70s called creeper pot. Creeper pot was, ran into it a couple times. Remember, you go to a guy's house, you buy a bag of this creeper pot, pay good money for it, go home, start smoking it, smoke the crap out of it, smoke, nothing. Oh, you get ripped off. You know you get ripped off. This stuff is bump. And you're on your way back to the guy's house. I'm going to beat the crap out of the guy who ripped me off with his bunk reefer. This ain't even any good. About halfway there, and all of a sudden I just got to sit down on the curb and watch the colors. It just kind of creeped up on me. And when did it hit you? I don't know, but man, am I stoned. And AA's like that. It's just like, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, wow, what happened to you? Sometimes, I love that part in the end of the book. It says that other people will often see the change in the newcomer before he can see it. They see it. And if they ask you, so when did this change? I don't know. We just become different here. Things change here. Not everything we want changes. Because when I say to my Father in the 7-step prayer, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. And I pray that you should remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I don't have any discernment in this. It's like this is my life and I don't even have a dog in this fight. In other words, I'm not even deciding what should be taken away and what shouldn't. I'm giving it to my Father. I'm giving it to my Creator for Him to choose in His vision what interferes with my usefulness to Him and my fellows. What an amazing prayer. I wouldn't have written it like that. I think if I would have written the prayer, I would have said something like, I'm now ready that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you should now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of everyone realizing what an amazing guy Bob is. That'd be a good one. Or that stands in the way of my being ridiculously happy. Don't I get happy? Happy's good. Don't I get happy? No, I get useful. If you're new, happy, useful, doesn't sound like a good deal, does it? You want to give up happy for useful? I don't want useful. I want happy. But I'll tell you something. I've known happiness and I've known usefulness. I'll take usefulness. Happiness is fleeting. Just as relief is fleeting. I don't want relief anymore. I want change. And I want spiritual transformation. I don't want relief. And I don't want happiness. I'd rather have usefulness. Usefulness is what allows a guy like me who's serving their primary purpose and doing what they've been divinely crafted to do by my own experience in God's hands. It allows a guy like me to put my head on the pillow and feel a rightness about my life and a rightness about everything and sleep well. It allows me to be right with me and right with you. Usefulness is the most important thing. It is a result of alignment that I serve the purpose I was created for. And those of us that have claimed the primary purpose, we realize that even our worst defects, even are the most rascally things about us, the most lecherous things about us, the most selfish things about us, Our biggest mistakes and our biggest failures become useful because you can bet you just really, really screwed up. In God's hands, you can bet there's going to be a guy walking into your home group within the next couple of months that just ruined himself with the same thing you ruined yourself with. And he, more than anything, he needs to know that he's not alone, that there's someone on earth that has screwed up like he's screwed up. And you will save that guy. You will have something for him nobody else has for him. And everything about us does that, doesn't it? I am very effective with the guys I sponsor, not because of my successes, because of my mistakes and failures and defects. That's what makes me useful. Some of them I overcome through God's grace, and some of them still remain. Some of them just seem to be, some of my things I found objectionable in inventories just seemed, at the best, to be covered up with a thin spiritual veneer that can crack. And they stay at bay contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And if I don't maintain the spiritual condition, it seems like the veneer cracks and they come out again. And then I have to go back and clean house and make right that anything that happened as a result of it and start over. There is no once and for all treatment for an ongoing chronic illness, but there is treatment, and it's daily. It's the best we ever get. I want to talk a little bit about step 8 and 9. Nothing has terrified me more since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in step 8 and 9. When I first started realizing what you were talking about, it was frightening. Oh my God. I remember sitting in a meeting and there was some old guy just ranting on and on about he had to pay all the money back. And I remember sitting there going, oh no. Oh no. All the money. Oh no, yeah, come on. Come on. He said, you got to pay back even the people that don't know you stole from them. I went, oh my God, stop it. Oh, if I'd have known I had to pay this stuff back, I wouldn't have stolen so much. This is hideous. And I wasn't against it intellectually. I understood restitution. I understood all that stuff intellectually. And I could see you would talk about your amends and, it got you back with your boss and you got your job back. Well, good for you. And it got you and your wife together. Oh, wonderful. I lived on the streets like an animal. I stole as a way of life because I was too messed up to work. I had to steal every day to get enough medicine to keep the madness at bay. And I'm not a gangster. I fancied myself, I guess, a gangster at one time. What I really was, the police told me, was a public nuisance. I was the guy who walked down the street. If you left your car unlocked, I'd steal your 8-track player. Which those of you who don't know what an 8-track player is, see one of the older members of AA. And I was the guy at the bar that I'd start drinking. That phenomenon of cravings on me, and I'll run out of money. So when you go to the bathroom, I drink your drink and steal your change and move to another part of the bar. I'll steal your purse. It's not personal. I'll sell you catnip, tell you it's the best marijuana you ever had. I'll go into a head shop and buy one of those sticks of opium incense and wrap it up in aluminum foil. Tell you, this just came in from Nam, man. This is good stuff. Get $100 for something that was 79 cents. It's not personal. It's just a way of life. And you guys say, pay the money back. I thought, I remember thinking, oh my God. I started kind of trying to do some kind of math in my head, trying to figure out how much this would. I remember thinking, if I got a really good job, beyond any job I've ever known, but if I got a really good job, And I worked 50 more years. I don't think I would make enough money in my lifetime to pay that back. You know, one of the things I did this daily. I did it all over the country. It's just a pathetic way of life. I had a terrible cigarette addiction. So 2-3 times a day, I would go into a bar or a laundromat or a gas station. I'd go up to a cigarette machine. I'd pretend I was putting money on it. And I was an unsavory looking guy with hair down to about here and a long beard, dirty usually. And I'd start banging on that machine and screaming, "This machine ripped me off, man. This machine ripped me off. It took my money." And I'd be banging. And they eventually, they just come, they open up the machine and give me a pack of cigarettes to get rid of me. Well, I did that 2-3 times a day. I can't even tell you some of the towns I was in. You know, back in Pennsylvania, the towns bleed into each other. I mean, I just did it as a way. I just see a place with a cigarette machine. I'm there. And you guys are saying you're going to pay all this stuff back. Oh, man. But my view of step 8 and 9, without the infusion of grace from the first 7 steps, was very much like the view of a kid in the 5th grade sitting down one day and looking at the tests he must pass in order to graduate from high school. A kid in the 5th grade is going to look at those tests and feel like he should quit school. It's hopeless. I don't even understand the questions. But if he goes to school every day and he does his homework, by the time he gets to the end of the 12th grade, he has in place within him everything he needs to pass that test. And we do that here. Carl Jung was the first person that ever coined a term that describes the grace of God and the way we see it manifested in Alcoholics Anonymous. The term was synchronicity. A synchronistic universe is a universe that accommodates your heart's desire. It's a universe where you've ruined your relationship with your family, and the abyss between you and your family is so far that it is insurmountable. You can't get back there. And from the moment of desire to make it right, the universe starts shifting itself around to make what was once impossible an eventuality. The impossible in Alcoholics Anonymous just takes a little longer, that's all. I mean, sit in meetings, listen to the synchronistic stories of the people who have had their kids taken away by the courts and they get their kids back. Of the homeless guys, the guy that used to come, we used to pick him up, he lived in the bushes. Do you know he just bought a house? The man and woman that was in the mental health system for 10 years, so heavily medicated they were more dead than alive. Did you see them with their sponsees laughing and making fun of their sponsees? Did you see the lights on? Did you see the freedom? They don't take any medication. They're not part of the mental health system. Something has happened to them. Something has transformed them. You can't get from where they were to where they are. It would take a miracle, wouldn't it? It would take a miracle to get from where I was to where I am. It would take a power beyond anything conceivable. And we tap that here. And it works slowly. And it works. And it works. When I was new, I surrendered to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I let everybody. I said, let these people in. And I tell you, when you open the door to people in AA, they start asking you questions. They butt into your business a little bit. You know what I mean? And they want to ask me about my mother and father. And I told them, I said, well, they have nothing to do with me anymore. My mom and dad loved me. I broke their hearts so many times that they eventually had to cut me out of their life. I stole so much so often from my dad. He became friends with the guy who owned the pawn shop in the town we lived in for buying his own stuff back. And they cut me out of their life. They used to be very social. They were very involved in the community. And now they lived like recluses because they were just tired of answering the questions about me. They couldn't go out socially anymore because they just couldn't take it. They couldn't take people saying, I heard your son's in jail. I heard, how's right? They couldn't take it. They were tired of it. And so they stayed home. They had no social life anymore. They cut me out of their life. They wouldn't take my calls. I was not welcome in their house. But my sister told me that I guess they couldn't cut me out of their heart completely. And so my mother saw a therapist, took medication, and my father slept 15 hours a day. And I know why that happened. How do you make that right? People in AA wanted me to start making amends to my parents. You don't understand, it's too late. Maybe a couple years ago, before I sold my mother's silverware, maybe before that horrible rage I went into in the kitchen, when my dad was just trying to help me and I flipped out, I just felt so threatened by what he said. I picked up this wooden kitchen chair and I swung at his head and it smashed on the counter. I remembered the look in his eyes, the terror. Or maybe when my mother had to find me in a pool of blood with a needle in my arm on the morning of her mother's funeral, when I found the drugs she was on the night before and I overdosed on drugs. Maybe before I did that to her on the day her mother was being buried. Maybe before I did that, I could have made amends. It's too late now. And I'm so grateful the people in Alcoholics Anonymous would listen and nod about it, tell them about how it was, and then they'd get right back, almost like they didn't even hear you. Well, you're going to make amends to your parents. What? You're not listening, are you? Those people in AA must have that ADD thing or something. I don't know. I don't hear you. I said, I can't. I said, we want you to call your mom. We want you to call your mom and dad. Just call them at least once a week. I said, you don't understand. They won't take my calls. You know what they said to me? They said, don't call collect. I had never thought of that. Don't call. Well, see, I'm used to the operator saying they'd hang up. They said, don't call collect. What a novel idea. Isn't it funny? I wouldn't think of that. That I'm so selfish and so self-centered that I have that egotistical sense of entitlement that I'm so selfish it would never occur to me to pay for the phone call to call my mother and father. That's pathetic, really. And I remember the first time I ever did it. I called. My mom answered the phone. When she heard my voice, it was not good. I got the response that you'll get from someone who really, really loved you and you broke their heart over and over and over and over again. I got, what do you want? And then I could hear the panic in her voice. She said, oh my God, you're not back in Pennsylvania again, are you? She was hoping I wasn't in town. I said, no, Mom, I'm in Nevada. And she said, you're in Nevada? Well, the operator didn't ask me to pay for the call. I said, no, Mom, I paid for the call. She went, you paid for the call? She couldn't believe it. Her voice shot up an octave in an exclamation. You paid for the call? It was startling to her. And she was very short with me, got off that phone. She didn't want to talk to me. I really had hurt them a lot. And they never did nothing but love me. It's funny how you try to blame them. You know how it is when you're not even with somebody you try, but it doesn't hold any water, really. And I started doing it. They told me to send them cards and letters and birthday presents and Mother's Day and Father's Day. And I was minimum wage job. It was a struggle for me. I remember the first Christmas, I got my mom a little thing and I got my dad. I couldn't afford much. I got my dad a necktie. It was $8 or $9 necktie. It was pathetic. It was pathetic. If I'd have bought my dad a house on the beach, it wouldn't even touch how far behind I am financially with my dad. I'm going to give him a necktie. I didn't want to do it. The people in AA made me do it. I tell you something. He got that tie, lit him up for a little while. For a moment, the wall came down. Just for a moment. Then he put it right back up again. And I persisted. My grand sponsor used to say, we rub away the wreckage with good works. We rub away the wreckage with good works. And I started acting like the son I never was, and I started calling them, and I was sending them little presents. And I was a year sober, and they decided, they didn't think that I was, they still thought, they really thought, even after a year of this, they thought I was still trying to con them. They were very suspect of me, very skeptical and very distant. And I guess they should be, you know. I mean, let's face it, if my parents were to easily accept me back into the fold, there would have been something wrong with their mental health with my track record. And they decided at when I was a year sober, that they were going to fly out to Las Vegas and eyeball me. They'd never been to Vegas, and they thought, well, you know, he was a bum trying to con us. We've never been to Vegas. It won't be a complete loss. They flew out there, and I met him at the airport. Took him to the Stardust where they were staying. They had a room there. And took him out to dinner with my sponsor and his wife. My sponsor suggested that I invite them to my home group. I would have never thought of that. I was almost embarrassed that I had to go to AA. I didn't want to hide it, but I felt an awkwardness about it. And I would have never thought of that, and it was brilliant. My first home group was an amazing home group. It met in people's homes, and there'd be some of the people in AA were doing very well. So you have to have a pretty good sized home to accommodate 70 people in your living room. And we'd meet in these people's homes, and there was a lot of laughter, and there was a lot of people in AA that were sober in my home group a long time, and they were very successful and very, like, they didn't look like what you'd imagine alcoholics to look like. They looked like they were doing really well, and there was a camaraderie in that group. And there was a lot of old timers, and they were always picking on the newcomers, you know, and goofing on our problems and laughing. You know how that is. That's the sign of a good group. Is that laughter. And then they'd see me with a couple of the new guys I'm trying to help, and I'm picking on them and goofing on them because AA functions on the first rule of plumbing: crap runs downhill. And they got to. I remember watching my mom. My dad, she grabbed my dad's hand, and she was listening to a woman talking about getting her kids back and how God was working in her life. And she turned to my dad and she said, "This is really good. This is really good." And they laughed at some of the stuff that was said there. And we're funny people. We don't realize how funny we are. We're funny. I was instructed by my sponsor before they went back to Pennsylvania that I was supposed to meet with them, and I had a list of all the money I owed my father, and it was foreboding. It was a lot. I figured it out. He told me to figure out a payment plan and to stick to it. I had to make these payments, and it was 12 and a half years. When you're a year sober, 12 and a half years is a lifetime. It was overwhelming. I'm not against making the amends, but I need to hit the lottery so I could be the big shot. And they told me, they said, "You're going to pay this back a nickel at a time, a dime at a time, because you sold your soul and your integrity a nickel and a dime at a time." So I had the 12 and a half year plan. I sat down in the coffee shop at the Stardust Hotel with my parents. I told my dad what I wanted to do. And it was just for years of, he had money he had to loan me for fines, or I'm going to go to jail, or I jacked off the rent money in my apartment. I was going to be homeless, or I got a new job and the transmission went out in the car, and then money I borrowed from him on stories of things I'd make up, and you know how we are. And I start to tell him about my 12 and a half year plan, and my dad says to me, he says, "Rob, I understand what you're trying to do, but we don't want you to pay back the money. We are just delighted you're sober. This is the first time in years that we had any hope that you would be okay. All we want you to do is stay sober, keep doing what you're doing in this AA thing, and don't forget about the money." Well, 12 and a half years. I just hit the recovery lottery. This is very cool. I'm getting the gift now. And I left there. I was on my way over to my sponsor's office, just excited. Oh my God, I love this amends. This is very cool. I'm thinking about other people I owe. I wonder if I could get them to see the light, like my parents. And I walk into my sponsor's office. I told him the good news. I said, I did what you told me. And I presented it to my dad. And my dad said I didn't have to pay him. Isn't that amazing? My sponsor said, it doesn't matter what your dad said. This is your debt. You have to make this right. And I'm looking at him like, oh, I got the wrong sponsor. This ain't right. I said, my dad said that. He said, it doesn't matter. This is your recovery. This is your integrity. This is your debt. You have to find a way to make it right. I said, oh, for God's sakes, I don't know what to do. I said, if I send my dad a check every month, I mean, he's not real wealthy, but they're well off enough. They won't even cash it. I don't know how to do it. And he said something. He says to this day, he's an old man now. I'm the executor of his estate. And I see him. I spend a couple days a week with him. He says it to this day. I shanghaied him down to the detox, and he said it to the people in the detox. He says, I don't know, but a way will be shown. I don't know, but a way will be shown. Whatever the hell that means, I don't know. Well, I'm working as a cashier in a retail store in the 70s and the early 80s. Back in the 70s, there was still a lot of gold and silver certificates in circulation. There was a lot of war nickels, wheat pennies, and there was a lot of silver coinage still in circulation. Quite a bit. Come through my register every day. My dad collected that stuff. He loved it. He'd sit for hours and put it in categories and boxes and bags and put them in those. He had those books with the slots for the coins. He did all that stuff. He collected it all. He just was fascinated with that stuff. And here I am. That stuff's passing through my register every day. And I thought, well, I'll talk to my boss. And I went to my boss and I said, would it be okay if I bought this stuff out of the register, set it aside, bought it? And he said, yeah, kid, I don't save it. Yeah, go ahead, whatever you want to do. And I started buying the stuff at work that came through the register, not with the intention of paying the debt off. That's ludicrous. But with the intention of maybe making a nice gift for my dad one day. Maybe I'd put together $1,000 or something worth of this stuff and give it to my dad. It'd be a very nice gift. Well, you know how it is. When you start doing the self-sacrifice, when you start heading down that road, isn't it odd how we get lucky? Isn't it? It's so amazing how the universe, God's universe, will facilitate our desire. And from the moment I started taking the action, and that it's important that I take the action. There's an adage that permeates this whole thing. And the adage is, without him, I can't. But without me, he won't. And I started taking the action. And from the moment I started taking the action, I started getting lucky. I started getting raises. I ended up getting another job offer for a management position for about twice as much money. I was getting bonuses. I was starting to accumulate a lot of this stuff. There was $100 gold certificates still in circulation that come through there. I had to put them in my boss's safe. He'd keep them for like 3-4 weeks. I'd buy them. And I started accumulating this stuff. There's a guy in AA had a moving business. He used to schedule moving furniture around my days off and time off so I could do it. And he'd pay me $100 cash, which was a lot of money in those days. And I found myself at about 4 years with the total amount of the debt in face value. I had a huge bag of quarters and dimes and half dollars. I had a shoebox full of gold and silver certificates. A big bag of wheat pennies. A whole bunch of war nickels. I had the full value. I couldn't believe it. The more I got into it, and just I was accumulating. And it was just, I couldn't believe it, how lucky I was getting. And I was just buying this stuff and just putting it away. And with the mother of my daughter, we drove back to Pennsylvania, and I gave my dad that stuff. Now, I've been into the amends process with him, and I've had a relationship with him now for several years. And me and my dad are pretty good. He trusts me now to some degree. He's forgiven me, and I know he's forgiven me. I know he loves me. He knows I love him. But when I gave my dad that money, something changed. And I was just talking with someone last week. I don't know how much of the transformation was in me and how much of it was in him, or maybe it was both. But when I gave my dad that money, it blew his mind. And it seemed like for the first time in our lives, I became a man in my Father's eyes. For the first time in my life, it felt like my dad respected me. I knew he loved me, but I didn't feel like, I'm Bob. Bob. Got to make allowances for Bob. Our daughter graduated from college. Bob's in a 12-step program. I'm special bus Bob. I mean, he never said that, but I always felt it kind of, you know what I mean? I just always felt like I'm coming from behind from my dad. My sister had all these accomplishments, and I'm running a cash register in a 12-step program, And my whole relationship with my dad changed when I gave him that money. We had about a year together. It was sweet. Then my dad died. I was so grateful to have that year. There was a sadness when he died because I wanted more. But I was so grateful that we were even, and I was able to fly back to Pennsylvania and bury him without any ghosts. And I know about ghosts. I know about when my grandfather died, how I never made amends to him and all the things I didn't say to him and that I wanted to say to him and all the things I did that I was so sorry for and I never got to make it right. AA taught me how to make that right. It says in the book that some people can't be seen when you write them an honest letter, and I made some gravesite amends. But I got to make mine to my dad when he was alive. And something shifted within me. My dad's spirit is alive within me to this day at times. I feel sometimes it sounds crazy, doesn't it? I talk to him sometimes. I felt his presence in my life when my daughter was born. I was in the delivery room and I held her. I was the first human being outside of her mother's womb to actually touch her and pick her up and hold her. I swear to God, I felt my dad's presence in that room. When I sold my company and I got the first 7-figure check, I swear to God, I heard my dad's voice say, "Rob, you done good." And I miss him sometimes. And he's calling. It's about time. Do you know sometimes in meetings they make an announcement to turn your phones off and ringers, and I always thought that was sort of controlling. People tell me what to do. You know why we do that? Because we know something. We know that if you leave your phone on, God's got a funny sense of humor. He's going to have some idiot call you right in the middle. And you know what happens when that happens? Everybody in the meeting turns and looks at you. And the rest of the meeting you will hear nothing because you'll have conversations in your head with everybody who just turned and looked at you. And why do we keep it on? Oh, I know why you keep it on. You're sure that your ex is at this moment going to come to their senses and realize how wrong they were and call you. It won't happen during the meeting. Trust me. So it's a public service announcement to suggest you turn your phones off because it'll just make you feel weird if it goes off. It will. I mean, I know I've had my phone on in a meeting. It makes me feel weird. Everybody's looking at me. What are you looking at? I'll tell you one more quick amends, and then we'll close for the night. I think the hardest amends we have to make is for things we do sober. I've screwed up a lot in sobriety, a lot. I've done a lot of things that I was ashamed of in sobriety. And one of the first and most dramatic ones that ever happened to me, I was working as a cashier in this store. I'm fairly new, and I had a tremendous cigarette addiction. I mean, bad. 3 packs a day often. I would light a cigarette from a cigarette. I smoked a lot. And one Thursday, I went into work and I was broke. I was waiting. I wouldn't have any money till the next day, Friday, when I got my paycheck. And I ran out of cigarettes. And we sold cigarettes in that store. So I thought to myself, and that's usually the way I do it, I thought to myself, well, I'll take a pack of cigarettes and I'll smoke them, and tomorrow when I get my paycheck, I'll ring them up. I'm not stealing. I'm just kind of deferring the payment for a day. It seemed like a reasonable deal. I got the cigarettes and smoked them. The next day I get my paycheck. I cashed it out of the bank. Thought goes through my mind, better ring those cigarettes up. And then another voice. I think it's the voice of the enemy. It comes on and it says, well, for God's sakes, Bob, you come to work early and you stay late. You work harder than everybody else here. It's only a pack of cigarettes. My God, everybody does a little bit of this stuff. It's probably factored into the cost of operation. And I never rang those cigarettes up, and I opened a door that would not close. And from that moment on, I never bought a pack of cigarettes again. And I supported a 3-pack-a-day habit from stealing from my boss. And I started stealing 6 packs of Diet Coke for my days off. Because what the heck, once you're stealing, you know. And isn't it? It's kind of pathetic and odd that I could be living a dishonest. I'm a liar. I'm a cheat, and I'm a thief, and I'm doing it daily, and I'm sweeping it under the rug and going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I've convinced me there's nothing wrong here. I have an ability of avoidance and sweeping stuff under the rug to the point where I'm doing this, and it's not a problem here. But when you do things that make you spiritually sick, it's odd because we don't get recovery. The realm of the Spirit's an odd place because you don't always scratch where you itch. Sometimes you itch over there and you scratch over here. It's a weird how these actions you're taking over here, you don't think have anything to do with what's going over there, and yet they do. And I started getting sick. I started filling up with myself and defensiveness. I started becoming real judgmental. It seemed to me, I had a hard time listening in meetings. It seemed like everybody was phony. You know what I mean? Like just phony. And I didn't know that I was projecting my own dishonesty onto you. I didn't know that I was doing that. But I was. I was in a relationship. I started blemishing the relationship, picking her apart. Eventually got back to work. The guy I worked for, who was a good guy. He was a good guy. He was always good to me. I started trying to pick him apart. And I'm getting sicker and sicker. The obsession to drink was circling me. And I worked around alcohol every day, and it never bothered me. And all of a sudden, something happened here. I remember the day I'm at work, and to me, it was like, I'm the guy who talks about in the book, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. I'm put in a position of neutrality, safe and protected alcohol. To me, it was like selling shoes. It was no different selling a guy a bottle of whiskey than it was selling him the rare cheeses and the caviar and stuff. It made no difference to me. It was just items I'm selling, and all of a sudden, it's not items I'm selling anymore. A guy came in one day, and he ordered this bottle that we just gotten in. I'd never heard of it. It was a weird-looking label, weird sound and stuff. He called Jägermeister, and he starts telling me about Jägermeister. He says, "Oh, man," he said, "this stuff, it's like cocaine and opium and alcohol together. It's more than just alcohol, man. It's psychedelic." And he's telling me all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I'm going, really? And I'm thinking about this Jägermeister. I'm not to the point where I want to drink it, but it's becoming interesting again. And all of a sudden, alcohol has power again. Because I've cut off the rest of the power. Alcohol it's starting to look like it might be effective medicine for this don't really feel quite right disposition that I have. I don't know that I'm spiritually sick. Get down on my knees one night, not right after that, as I'm in the habit of doing, thanking God for that day of sobriety. It had become rote for me by this time. And on my knees in the floor of that apartment, I just yelled out, "God, what the hell's going on here?" The moment I asked the question, I knew in my innermost self what the problem is. the reason I'm on my way to drink again, the reason I'm getting sick and I'm distant and disconnected from AA and from God and from everybody else is because I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and I'm living a double life. I'm going to meetings and professing to be this honest member of AA, and the fact is I'm not any of that. I'm a phony. And I started looking at it, and it disgusted me. I have gotten to places in my sobriety where I'll tell you, I just can't stand me. Isn't it amazing how much great, amazing growth comes from those places? And I couldn't stand me. I started doing the math. I started figuring I know what I got to do. I got to go face that guy and pay it back. And I don't want to face this guy. This guy that's my boss has zero tolerance for employee theft. I watched him throw a guy out, threaten to have him arrested. Zero tolerance. So I know when I tell him he's going to fire me. And I had a hard time getting this job. I'm going to have a hard time getting another one. I have a lot of blank spaces on my resume, which, don't, like self-employed. And I mean, I already have unexplained areas where people say, what'd you do for those 2 years? And I'm going to have another period of unexplained, because I don't want to tell them. If I tell them about working at that place, they're going to call him up, and I'm not going to be able to get a reference. He's going to say, yeah, he ripped me off, stole from me. And I don't even have the money to pay him. I know it's a lot, too. I'm figuring out, man, it's going to be quite a bit. Pay this back. And you know what the worst part of it? The worst part, the guy I got to go face has heard me prattle on a couple occasions about my rigorous program of honesty in AA. I'll tell you something I learned from that. Don't ever trust anybody who tells you how honest they are. The really, truly honest people I know will tell you the truth. That you get them scared enough, they're capable of lying to you. They might have to make amends, but they'll lie to you. And I have to go face the guy I told how honest I was. And it's terrified me. I remember how scared I was, and I had this knot in the pit of my stomach, and I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm praying my way right up to talk to this guy, and I started telling him what I did. And he got very angry at me. He started yelling at me. I hurt him very badly because he'd been very good to me. And he gave me a job when I couldn't get a job. When I jerked off a bunch of jobs already, he gave me a job. He was pissed at me. And all of a sudden I realized that he didn't fire me. And I said, do I still have a job? Yeah, and you're going to pay back every ounce, every penny of it. Okay, I will. I promise you I will. And I'd figured out the amount that I owed him, and here's what I did. I added on 10%, and I added on another $50. You know why? Well, if I'm going to misjudge the amount, it's not going to be in his favor. I'm just wired that way. I used to we buy a pound of pot. I'll divide, thank you. I mean, there's like an automatic, I take an edge built into me in my perception. And I wanted to be free of this so badly. I just thought, I'd rather make sure I got the amount. Even if I overpay it a little bit, I want to be free of this. So I jacked it up 10%, another $50 of what I estimated, and I started making the payments. The book says we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. Boy, it was amazing. I really started liking working there a lot. I remember feeling like I never imagined I'd want to be a cashier in a store for the rest of my life, but I think I could work here. I like the people. I like the customers. I like the job. I feel useful. I'm doing something positive every day. I think I could do this the rest of my life, and I was very settled in there before I was even halfway paying that back. Within 30 days of making the last payment, I wasn't looking for a job. A guy came to me out of nowhere and offered me a job with a chance to make twice as much money and a chance for management. I went to my boss and I told him, and he said, oh man, you can't pass that up. You got to take that. That's a good opportunity for you. And I gave him my 2 weeks, and I went to work for this other guy, and I never stole a nickel, never took home a ballpoint pen. And I gave him 10 cents for his nickel every single day. And I'd learned what my grand sponsor, I learned to practice what he said. You forget yourself. You go to work for one reason and one reason only, and that's to help God's kids. You go there to be of service and to be helpful, period. I started doing that. I became very successful there. In no time at all, I'm running that joint. I'm making a lot more money, getting big bonuses. It's facilitating paying off all the other amends. And a period of time goes on, and I'm very successful there. I'll go into a Denny's restaurant, and the guy that I'd worked for and stole from and paid back is in there with his wife, and we're pretty good friends. And it was good to see. I went up to him. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He says, "Oh, all right." I said, "Actually, I'm a little sad." I said, "Oh, what's going on?" He said, "Well, did you hear I was going to sell my store?" I said, "Yeah, I did. I did hear a rumor about that." Yeah, he said it fell through, that because of the slot machines and the liquor license, the Gaming Control Board wouldn't approve this guy from Korea. And he had a temporary for a while, and now it's back in my lap. And he's kind of running into the ground. And I thought I was burnt out. I thought I could retire, and I guess it's not in the cards. And I heard myself say something to him I couldn't believe I was saying. I was embarrassed to say it. I heard myself say, "Man, I would like to buy your store." The minute I said it, I was so embarrassed because I don't have any money. And I said, I'm just kidding. I don't have any money. I can't do that. And he said, looked at me for a moment, and he said, "What's your day off?" And I told him, he said, "Meet me here. We'll have lunch." And on my day off, I got down to the Denny's restaurant. He was there before I was, and I walked in. He was sitting in a booth. He had some papers on the table. And I sat down, and he started to make a proposition to me. He said, "If you'll come back and run this company, it's not doing very well. It's like probably losing money right now. But if you can pump it back up to when it was real profitable, you will gain a percentage of the business every year. At the end of 5 years, it's yours. I'm out of here. And you'll still have to pay me for fixtures and equipment and inventory, but the store can make the payments for that." And he said, "I'm done." He said, "What do you think?" What do I think? What do I think? I'm a guy with a resume that has like running a cash register, digging ditches, telemarketing, and selling blood. I mean, it's not. I went to some amazing. I flunked out of some of the best colleges in the country. I don't think I got a year's worth of credit. I have nothing. I am not a rocket to financial stardom. And this guy's making me an offer that's beyond anything I can imagine. I said, "Absolutely. I would love to do that." And I went to work in there, and I started running that place, and I started practicing the principles of AA, of self-forgetting and going to work to be of service and as kind and as helpful to people as I could possibly be. And that company was doing about little over 600,000, I think, when I took it over. At one point, we were doing almost 10 million. And I started buying tracts of land and building buildings and shopping centers and opening other stores. And I sold that company a few years ago. I was able to retire with a level of comfort that's really beyond anything I deserve. All because of one amends. Because of one amends. I know, like I'm standing here, I would have never had that. None of that would have happened to me if I wouldn't have made that amends. Would I have drank again? Probably. Was it possible to not make the amends and stay sober? Maybe. Maybe I'd be one of those guys that's 25 years sober and who has a job that hates it, or has gone from job to job and never has anything. It's funny how much of financial difficulties have to do with unmade amends. I get guys that come to me for funny reasons, because I have the trappings of a very materially successful life. And they come to me to sponsor them, and they think I'm going to teach them some trick, business trick or something. Give them the secret stock or something. I don't know what they think. And it's always, let's roll up your sleeves. Let's dig in and let's look at the unmade amends. And there's always unmade amends. There's always, and sometimes it's stuff because you think you got away with something, don't you? No, you didn't. Well, the people you owe don't know that you owe them, don't they? Yeah, but that doesn't matter. The worst person in the universe has the information that you owe. You. The one person that can sabotage your life knows what you did. And isn't it, I believe it's karmatic. I think, I've watched guys roll their sleeves up and self-sacrifice and pay those people back. Some guys 20, 25 years sober that have never done it. Then I get to watch the results of the cause and effect. Does that mean that they're going to become wealthy? No, not necessarily. There's a promise in 127 of the book, and we'll end with this. And I bank on this. This was showed to me many years ago, and I think you can take this to the bank. It says, right in the middle of the page, it says, although financial recovery is on the way for many of us, we found we could not place money first. And check this out. For us, material well-being always followed spiritual progress. It never preceded it. What does that mean? It means you're going to live a spiritual life and get rich? No, not necessarily. Material well-being doesn't have anything to do with decimal points. It's an inside job. I know a guy who I tried to sponsor him for a while. He's probably worth $1 billion or more. He showed me a check that he just received from selling one of his casinos. It was $140-some million. It was all his. He can't stay sober, and even at the periods when he was sober, he had no material well-being. He worried more about money. I know another guy who's sober a number, double digits, but he's one of the most miserable, driven persons I know. And he probably makes close to $1 million a year. And he has no material well-being. My daughter, and I know, and I'll use people in AA. I know people in AA that don't make very much money at all, maybe $30,000 a year, $40,000. And they have a tremendous sense of material well-being because they know they're taken care of. They're right with themselves, they're right with life, and they're right with God's kids. And so there is no bad karma there. You know what karma is? If you translated it out of the Hindi directly into the English, it would translate as the word doing. I didn't know that. I thought that karma was the way the universe spanked you for being bad or something, you know? In other words, I've hurt these people over here and I never paid them back, and I think I got away with it. And my life is turning to crap over here. The karma is that in a way I can't see, it's actually my doing. I don't even see. Isn't it odd that when you sabotage your life, you can't see your fingerprints, but they're there? That it's my doing. Somehow I position myself to life to punish myself over here. And I tell you, I think that one way or another, we all get even. And if I don't get even with you, I'll get even with me, but I'm going to get even. And so I try to make things right. And I could tell you 100 stories about amends and for things I've done sober that I've had to go make right. They're the hardest. Because none of us gets good here. We just try to grow along spiritual lines. I love Bill Wilson when he said, no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. But we do try to progress. And we claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. And so the guy that I was yesterday strives to move closer to God and closer to you. I think that alcoholics are like sharks. My big obsession in my life the last many years is scuba diving. Do you know that there's a type of shark that God has made in such a manner that it can't just sit still? There's some fish. Well, I don't go night dives all the time. There's fish that just kind of lay on the bottom, sleep, tuck themselves into the coral, and just lay there and sleep. These certain sharks have to continue to move because their gills are designed in such a way that they have to have flow of water over them for oxygenate their blood. They have to have flow. And so even when they're sleeping, they go out into the deep blue and they just have small tail actions. They keep moving. They keep moving even when they're asleep. And I think I'm that way. I think if I stop growing along spiritual lines, I start to suffocate. What happens is I just get me all over me until it feels like somebody stepped on the oxygen hose to my soul. And so I got to grow along spiritual lines. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you in the morning at 10 a.m. We're just going to close it.